On WISN. I'm joined now by Governor Scott Walker, who has graciously made some time for us this morning. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Hey, good morning. I'm doing well.
Well, off the bat, I want to say I'm still with you. My listeners are still with you, and the silent majority of voters in the state are rooting for you harder than ever. And you will have our support as ever. But I do have some tough questions for you today. I sense a disillusionment among your base, and I've been trying to talk some people off the ledge this morning. But I understand why. We have so much invested in this and in you, and finally, after waiting for so long and working so hard, we've managed to put Republicans in charge of state government to make real changes, only to see 14 outlawed Democrats disenfranchising our vote and shutting down the legislative process unless and until they get what they want. It's just so wrong, it's so criminal to many of us, that it makes us want to spit tax. And, and some of us are wondering, well, why negotiate?
Well, we've been frustrated as well for the past 3.5 weeks, and whether it's fair or not, the fact of the matter is until we find some alternative, those 14 state senators are legally stopping this act from going forward. And so our thought, and just as I said publicly, I've said for the past week, we were willing to talk. There are a handful of reasonable ones, reasonable state senators who want to come back. And my principle has been, as you saw now in the paper with the open records requests for the emails that have been going back and forth between my staff and those individual senators, is we were trying to figure out a way that did not undercut our basic premise, which was not only to balance the budget at the state and the local level, but also to give particularly local governments the tools they need to make their governments run better. So the example we've talked about time and time again, the school teacher last year, long before I was the governor, long before Republicans were in charge, when MPS had to lay off hundreds and hundreds of teachers, the woman who was the outstanding new teacher of the year was one of the first people out. Why? Because collective bargaining contracts base their things on things like seniority, not based on merit or on performance. Even with the things we put on the table as suggestions to bring those senators back, school districts would still be protected from things like that, so they could make staffing based on performance, as well as getting their pension and health care contribution, getting their other savings out there. The things we are talking about are merely components or portions of the mechanism. They're not in any way giving up the principle of what we're trying to accomplish.
Right. And I know what your attempt was with these negotiations. It was an attempt by you and Senator Fitzgerald to give the Democrats a face-saving way to return to Madison. They left with no plan. They want to claim some victory as they come back. So, the way I read this was you and Senator Fitzgerald providing a face-saving path home. So you tried, but they instead kicked you in the face.
Well, the worst part about it is you've got a couple of these reasonable senators who were still, even through the weekend, trying to work with us. The problem, time and time again, is Senator Mark Miller, who's from Madison, who I don't know exactly what the reason, whether it's his staff or whether it's the union boss who's from Washington, or what exactly the influence is. But any time we think there's movement with a handful of these senators who really, truly want to come back, they've had it with this. They didn't see an end game in this. They're frustrated that there wasn't a better strategy there. They want to come back. They want to get on. They want to debate other things on another day. Mark Miller, the state Senate minority leader, stands in the way, and I think he's doing a disservice not only to those of us who support this bill, but I think he's doing a disservice to other members of his very own caucus.
So now what? I mean, what is your message to your base who just wants you to take the gloves off because they're frustrated already? Is it more negotiations? Be patient?
Well, for us, right. I mean, throughout all this, we've tried to stay level-headed. Getting mad doesn't get things done. I can understand people's frustration. We're frustrated. I think most people across the spectrum are frustrated with the inaction in the state capitol. But for us, we have to just go through every possible step, every possible scenario, and find a way to bring these senators home, or ultimately find a way to have a vote. And when we do, again, the principle has to be, and I said it over and over again, we will not sell out our local governments. We cannot have a reduction in state aid of the magnitude we're talking about, which, by the way, Jay, is amazing that the Main Street media has overlooked this, but 45 states have major budget deficits. Mm-hmm. State after state, Texas, Florida, heck, New York and California, both of whom have Democrats for governors, all those states are cutting billions of dollars from their schools and the local governments. The difference is in those states, they're giving them only one of two options. They're only saying either you pass it on to local governments and schools by massive layoffs and service reduction, or you pass it on to local governments through massive property tax increases. We are the only state in the country that's saying, no, there's a third better option, and that is asking all of us, myself included, as government employees, to pay a modest amount for our pension and a modest amount for our health care. When we do, that gives us a much better alternative to massive layoffs or massive property tax increases. We're being progressive. We're being truly progressive and innovative in this state, and I think at some point my hope is that at least a few of those senators realize it's time to give us a chance to push this.
And polls show that the voters are still with you on those issues. Should people pay more? Should these public workers pay more for their pensions? Yes. More for their health care? Yes. And I was struck by your budget address. I was struck by how 3/4 of that assembly chamber was Republicans cheering, and there was one little corner that was Democrats. There are so few of them left, and still they can stymie the process and disqualify the November vote. They still really hold these cards?
Well, and that's the frustrating part. It is one of those where this is unprecedented. This is uncharted water. This has never happened before. And as Scott Fitzgerald and Jeff Fitzgerald have pointed out, but particularly Senator Fitzgerald, 2 years ago, when on a Wednesday Jim Doyle proposed a budget repair bill that raised taxes by $1 billion, the legislature crammed it through on the very next day, on a Thursday. The Senate Republicans stood up, made their case, carried the day, tried to get this changed, tried to get it blocked, didn't have the chance, and instead of running away from a true debate on it, they went to the voters in November of 2010 and said, hey, that approach didn't work. For all the people, you see these occasional signs of the protesters who say, shared sacrifice, tax the rich. Well, remember, we did that in Wisconsin 2 years ago. We had $1 billion in the budget repair bill. We had billions of more dollars on top of that in the budget bill itself. All we saw were jobs and people flee the state of Wisconsin. That did not work for us. That actually led to us, along with other factors, losing jobs in the state of Wisconsin. We're trying a different approach, one that's contrary to not only 2 years ago, but contrary to what Illinois has done, where they're losing jobs and employers. And instead, we're trying to make it friendly for people who want to create jobs in this state. And we deserve a chance to make that case. To me, the way you fight this, if you don't like it, is you make your case, you make your argument, and then if it doesn't work, you come back in the next election in 2012 and you make the case to the voters. And if the voters say, no, we don't want what's going on, and they elect somebody else. But if they see after 2 years that this sort of approach actually helped stabilize not only our budget, but our economy, which I believe it will do here in the state of Wisconsin, it will send a clear message to investors across the world that this is the place to come and bring their money to invest in jobs, because we're stable and we take care of our problems. We don't just pass them on to the next generation. That's the kind of approach I think will help us.
Yeah, your frustration that you and the Fitzgeralds showed on Monday, coupled with the emails being released yesterday, make it clear which side is telling the truth here about what has transpired behind the scenes, with you Republicans working harder for a deal, it seems, than the Democrats. It's not being portrayed, though, as, the heat's on Walker, the GOP is about to crack. Is the pressure on you to end this?
No, for us, we have continued to have those lines of communication open. Scott Fitzgerald and the Speaker and I talk daily, sometimes multiple times a day. They've been over my house multiple times over the weekends. We are serious about finding a pathway home, because I think in the end, what I've found with people all over the spectrum, I think you're right, overwhelmingly, people, whether they're Republican, Independent, even some discerning Democrats, think it is reasonable for us to expect all state and local workers to pay something for their health care and something for their pension, which even under our proposal is still well less than what the average taxpayer, hardworking taxpayer is making. And by the way, it is still about half of what federal government employees pay for health care, which was interesting when the president tried to go after us, and we pointed out federal employees don't have collective bargaining for wages.
I love how the unions suggest that if they lose these collective bargaining privileges, it's just going to be catastrophe. Well, look at the federal workers. Do you think federal workers are hurting in any way?
Well, that's why I say, where's the protest around the White House? I mean, it's just incredible double standard, but it is what it is. And so we're trying to find a pathway home. We've started picking up, I know you've been getting the emails from our office where we start pointing out, the public's with us on saying, you should be able to make some savings. I think where unfortunately the millions and millions of dollars coming in allegedly coming in from outside sources, mainly the national public employee, government worker unions who don't want to have any change, who say one thing and then put out flyers that say no compromises, don't give in to any of these things. I think the public somehow believes, like you say, that there's a right. Well, there's not a right, because the federal government doesn't have it for its employees. And equally of greater importance, I think, is the fact that collective bargaining does have a cost beyond the pension and the health care contribution. We've given example after example, whether it's the $68 million school districts could save if they were able to buy their health insurance not from the teachers union company, WA Trust, but instead from the state employee health care plan or a cheaper plan. It's the example the other day that I know you guys were talking about in your station in Green Bay, where they have the Emeritus program, where they pick up a year's worth of pay for 30 days of work. I mean, there's an example, the $150,000 bus driver in Madison, the $6,000 that people get under collective bargaining just for carrying a pager. I mean, these things are things that I think workers all across the state scratch their head and saying, I'm paying taxes for that.
It's abuse after abuse after abuse.
And that's collective bargaining.
Exactly. I want to emphasize, I know you know this, I want to emphasize to the audience, you have the votes to pass your bill intact. You just don't have a quorum. So why not wait for the quorum or find a way to force the quorum rather than negotiate items out of your bill?
Well, we're looking at every and all options. I mean, as a couple of the senators on the Democrat side were quick to note, this was just a discussion. This was not, I mean, at no point did we have a final deal. We kept getting talks from the senators saying, hey, we're coming back. We even had talks at some point where we threw out ideas and they'd say, you know what, we think we're just going to come back without a deal. Because they were feeling like, and I understand from their point of view, they're feeling like at some point from their side of this argument, they would be viewed as not having got enough, and they knew we weren't going to give in on the core of collective bargaining, that local governments had to have these tools, and that ultimately we thought if you're going to ask more for pension, you're going to ask more for health care, you've got to give those workers, the employees themselves, the right to choose whether or not they want to be in a union, and in many cases the right to choose whether they're up to $1,000 or more. In the case of MPS teachers, it's more because they have both dues of about $1,000 for MPS and then another $450 or so for the state teachers union. That's real money. That's $1,400 that a teacher could say, instead of using to go to a union that does things I don't necessarily agree with, I would like that to go to pay off a portion of my pension or health care contribution. Those are all things we weren't compromising on, and some of those Senate Democrats said that they couldn't move this.